The night I heard my wife discussing the price of my murder, I didn't call the police. I didn't confront her. I didn't even make a sound. I simply stood outside the library door and listened to the woman I had loved for 8 years plan how to make sure I would never see another birthday. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 38 years old, and for most of my life, I believed money could solve almost any problem. I was wrong. I had built a multi-million-dollar business in Chicago from the ground up. I owned a beautiful home, drove expensive cars, traveled whenever I wanted, and had a wife most people would consider perfect. Her name was Victoria Carter. She was beautiful, intelligent, elegant, and always knew exactly what to say in front of other people. Everyone thought I was lucky to have her. I thought so too, until that night. I had returned home almost 2 hours earlier after a business meeting was suddenly canceled. I walked through the front door quietly, expecting to find Victoria upstairs. Instead, I heard voices coming from the library. One was hers, the other belonged to Ryan Mitchell. Ryan had been a close friend of Victoria's for years. At least that's what I had always believed. I stopped outside the door. Ryan sounded nervous. "What if Ethan finds out?" Victoria answered calmly. "He won't. Ethan is too distracted by his company and his money to notice what's happening right under his nose." My heart began pounding. Then Ryan asked the question that changed my life. "And if something goes wrong?" There was a long silence. Then Victoria spoke. "Then Ethan doesn't make it to next week." I froze. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My wife was talking about killing me. The woman who kissed me every morning. The woman who told me she loved me before going to sleep. The woman I had trusted with everything I owned. She was planning my death. I wanted to throw open the door. I wanted to scream, but something stopped me. Instinct. I quietly stepped away from the door and walked upstairs before either of them could see me. A few minutes later, Victoria entered our bedroom with a smile on her face. "You came home early," she said. "Yeah, the meeting was canceled." She walked over and kissed me. I forced myself to smile. That was the hardest thing I had ever done. Because for the first time in 8 years, I was looking into my wife's eyes and wondering whether she was imagining me dead. Later that night, Victoria brought me a drink. I accepted it, but didn't take a sip. When she finally fell asleep, I picked up her phone. I knew the passcode. I opened her messages. The first message I saw was from Ryan. "Tomorrow night, no mistakes this time." My hands started shaking. I took a picture of the message with my phone. Then I saw another message. "Once Ethan is gone, the company is ours." I stared at those words for several seconds. The company was worth far more than I had ever told Victoria, but she already knew. Suddenly, this wasn't only about killing me. They wanted everything. My money, my company, my property, my entire life. But one word in that message bothered me more than anything else. Ours. Ryan and Victoria were only two people, so who was the third? And why did they need my death before they could take control of my company? I put the phone back exactly where I found it. Then I lay beside my sleeping wife and stared into the darkness. I knew one thing for certain. Victoria believed she was secretly preparing for my death. She had no idea that I had already discovered her secret, and I wasn't going to run. I was going to find out exactly who wanted me dead and why, because if they were planning my funeral, I was going to make sure they were the ones who ended up needing one. The next morning, I sat across from Victoria at the breakfast table and pretended nothing had happened. She poured coffee into my cup. "Big day at the office?" she asked. I looked directly into her eyes. Very big. She smiled. If only she knew what was happening inside my head. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. I needed evidence, real evidence. So before going to work, I made a private call to Mark Wilson, the head of my security team, and one of the few people I trusted completely. I didn't tell him that my wife wanted me dead. I simply told him I suspected someone inside my organization was accessing my private financial information. By noon, Mark had something for me. He placed a folder on my desk.
Ethan, there have been several unauthorized transfers from your personal accounts. I opened the folder. My stomach tightened. Nearly $8 million had been moved over the previous 3 months. Who authorized these? Mark pointed to the documents. According to the bank records, you did. I stared at the signatures. They looked exactly like mine, but I had never signed those documents. Someone had forged my signature. And suddenly, everything made sense. The murder wasn't the beginning of the plan, it was the final step. Someone had already been stealing from me while preparing to take control of everything after my death. That afternoon, I asked Mark to quietly track Ryan. A few hours later, Mark called me. Ryan is heading to an old warehouse on the south side. I followed from a distance. I watched Ryan walk inside. 10 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up. A man stepped out. The moment I saw his face, my blood ran cold. It was Daniel Harper, my business partner, my closest advisor, the man who had been beside me for 15 years. I had trusted Daniel with financial decisions, company expansion, and millions of dollars. Now I was watching him meet secretly with the man who wanted me dead. I stayed hidden while Mark recorded their conversation from a safe distance. Ryan spoke first. Victoria thinks Ethan's death will make her rich. Daniel laughed. Let her think that. Ryan looked confused. What do you mean? Daniel's voice became cold. After Ethan is gone, Victoria gets whatever I decide to give her, but the company belongs to us. I felt a chill run through me. Daniel wasn't helping Victoria, he was using her. Then he said something even more disturbing. There is only one thing we still need. Ryan asked, what? Ethan's new will. I nearly stopped breathing. My new will. A document almost nobody knew existed. Several weeks earlier, I had quietly changed my estate plan, and there was something inside that will that would make Daniel's entire plan worthless. But apparently he didn't know that. I returned home that evening with one thought in my mind. I could go to the police. I could expose Victoria, Ryan, and Daniel immediately, but I didn't have enough evidence to prove everything. I needed them to reveal the entire plan themselves. So I decided to give them a reason to act. That night, I sat beside Victoria on the couch. I looked exhausted. She immediately noticed. Are you okay? I took a slow breath. I went to the doctor today. Her expression changed. What did he say? I lowered my voice. He thinks I have a serious heart condition. She stared at me. How serious? I don't know yet, I said, but he told me I shouldn't assume I have a lot of time. For a second, something flashed across her face. It was almost impossible to notice. Fear? Shock? Or excitement? Then she hugged me. I won't let anything happen to you. I wrapped my arms around her, but inside I was thinking something completely different. You already planned for something to happen to me. I had just given her the perfect opportunity. A sick husband, an uncertain future, and the possibility that I might change my will. The next morning, I told Victoria that I was meeting my lawyer to discuss my estate. Her face went pale. She tried to hide it, but I noticed. That was exactly what I wanted, because now I knew they were going to move quickly. That evening, Mark installed hidden security equipment throughout the house. I also gave him one final instruction. If anything happens to me, release everything we've collected. He looked at me seriously. Are you sure you want to go this far? I nodded. They think they're planning my death. I looked toward the hallway where Victoria was standing. They have no idea I'm planning their downfall. That night, I went to bed early. I turned off the lights and closed my eyes. I knew someone was watching me. I knew someone was waiting for the right moment. And sometime after midnight, I heard the bedroom door slowly open. I kept my eyes closed. Footsteps moved toward my bed. Then I heard Victoria whisper, "He's asleep." Another voice answered, "Ryan, then it's time." But there was one more voice behind him, a voice I recognized immediately. Daniel. And this time, they weren't talking about what they were going to do. They were ready to do it.
I kept my eyes closed. My heart was pounding so hard that I was afraid they would hear it. Victoria stood beside my bed. Ryan was somewhere behind her, and Daniel was waiting near the door. Then I heard Victoria whisper, "Is he completely asleep?" Ryan stepped closer. "He won't wake up." Daniel's voice was cold. "Good, we don't have much time." I knew this was the moment. Everything I had suspected was about to become undeniable. For weeks they had been stealing from me, planning my death and preparing to take my company. Now they were finally going to reveal the truth. Ryan reached toward me. I suddenly opened my eyes. Looking for something? All three of them froze. Victoria stumbled backward. "Ethan?" I slowly sat up. "Yes, Ethan." Daniel stared at me in disbelief. "But you're supposed to be sick." I smiled. "I am sick." I looked at Victoria. Sick of being lied to. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Daniel stepped forward. "You don't understand what you're doing." "Oh, I understand perfectly." I picked up my phone from the nightstand and placed it on the bed. Their faces changed when they saw the recording app running. "I've recorded everything." Victoria's eyes filled with panic. "You can't do this." "I already did." I pressed a button. Their conversation from the warehouse began playing. Daniel's voice filled the room. "After Ethan is gone, the company belongs to us." Victoria covered her mouth. Ryan looked to Daniel. "You said he wasn't recording anything." Daniel's expression turned furious. "Shut up." That was all the police needed. A moment later, the bedroom door burst open. Officers entered from the hallway. Victoria screamed. Ryan tried to run, but Mark and two officers stopped him before he reached the stairs. Daniel didn't move. He simply stared at me. "You set us up." I looked at him. "No." I shook my head. "You set yourselves up. I just gave you enough rope." The investigation that followed uncovered more than I had imagined. Daniel had been secretly transferring money from several company accounts for months. The $8 million taken from my personal accounts was only a fraction of what he had stolen. He had created fake financial documents, forged my signature, and planned to make my death look like a medical emergency. Victoria had agreed to help because Daniel promised her a huge portion of my estate. Ryan had been paid to help carry out the final part of the plan. But there was one thing they never discovered: my new will. Several weeks before I discovered their betrayal, I had changed it completely. Almost everything I owned had been placed into a protected charitable trust. Victoria would receive nothing. Daniel couldn't touch the company, and the money they had spent months fighting over was already beyond their reach. When Victoria learned about the will, she broke down. "You would leave everything to strangers?" I looked at her calmly. "No, I left it to people who actually need it." She stared at me through tears. "After everything we've been through?" I answered quietly. "After everything you tried to do to me." Months later, the case went to court. The evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, financial documents, forged signatures, messages, and security footage told the entire story. Victoria and Ryan were held accountable for their roles in the murder conspiracy. Daniel faced additional charges for financial crimes and fraud. Their perfect plan had collapsed. But winning didn't feel the way I had imagined. One evening, I stood alone outside the house where Victoria and I once planned our future. The house looked exactly the same, but I wasn't the same man anymore. I had learned something money could never teach me. Trust isn't measured by how long someone has been beside you. It's measured by what they do when they think you're not watching.
I got into my car and drove away from the house for the last time. As Chicago's lights disappeared behind me, I thought about that first night, the night I heard my wife planning my death. She thought she was preparing for my funeral. Ryan thought he was going to become rich. Daniel thought he was going to own my company. But none of them understood the truth. They weren't planning my ending. They were writing their own. I looked at the road ahead and finally allowed myself to breathe. For the first time in months, I wasn't running from anyone. I was simply moving forward. And if there's one lesson I learned from the night my wife betrayed me, it's this. Sometimes the person standing closest to you is the one holding the knife. But if you survive the betrayal, you don't just escape the trap, you become the person who finally closes it.